Life is always happening around us, often in ways that we don't fully understand. Many people feel like they're caught up in patterns, unable to break free from the cycles they find themselves in. It's easy to think that external forces are in control, that we're just along for the ride. But there's something more to it. It's not just about what happens to us, but about how we perceive what happens. Our attention, what we focus on, dictates the reality we experience. It's not that the world changes according to what we want, but rather that our experience of the world changes depending on where we direct our attention. Most of the time, people move through life passively, reacting to the things that happen without realizing they have a choice. The power of attention is in realizing that the things we focus on gain strength. When we constantly focus on problems, the problems start to take over our lives. We give them power without realizing it. The key isn't to ignore problems, nor is it to pretend they don't exist. The key is in understanding that we choose how much attention we give them. It's about finding a balance between acknowledging what's happening and not letting it define us. It's easy to spiral into negative thinking, where everything seems to confirm the worst, but it's within our control to stop feeding that cycle. When we focus on the things that make us anxious, upset, or afraid, we're letting those things take up space in our minds. The more attention we give to these negative experiences, the more they shape the way we see the world. But just as we can focus on the things that weigh us down, we can also shift our focus toward things that lift us up. This doesn't mean forcing ourselves into false positivity or suppressing our emotions. It means recognizing that where our attention goes, our energy flows. Imagine the mind as a field, and whatever thoughts or emotions we feed are like seeds we're planting. If we continuously water the seeds of fear, doubt, or frustration, they'll grow and dominate the landscape. But if we choose to water the seeds of acceptance, resilience, or hope, then over time, those are the things that will flourish. It's not an instant process. It takes time and patience. But gradually, the things we choose to focus on will start to shift how we experience life. It's easy to think that change comes from outside, that we need something external to happen to feel better or more content. But the reality is that change starts from within. It's not about denying what's difficult or pretending everything is perfect. It's about knowing that how we choose to perceive something gives it its power. When we react to something with fear or anger, we're giving that situation control over us. But when we respond with a calm mind, accepting what is without judgment, we take back our own power. There's a difference between being in control and being at peace. Most people want control over their circumstances, but that's not always possible. The world doesn't bend to our will, and trying to force it to only leads to more frustration. What we can control, though, is how we respond to whatever comes our way. When we stop fighting against reality and start accepting it for what it is, we free ourselves from the unnecessary suffering that comes from resistance. Acceptance doesn't mean resignation. It doesn't mean giving up. It means recognizing that we are here, in this moment, and that's all there is. The present moment is the only thing that's real. Everything else, our memories of the past, our worries about the future, is just in our minds. We create our own suffering by clinging to these thoughts, by refusing to let go of what was or what might be. But in truth, the past is gone, and the future doesn't exist yet. All we have is now. It's easy to get trapped in cycles of worry or regret because the mind loves to cling to things. We replay situations over and over, thinking about what we should have said or done differently. But the truth is that these thoughts are just illusions. They don't change what has already happened, and they don't help us move forward. They're like a weight we carry around, slowing us down and keeping us stuck in place. The only way to move forward is to release the grip we have on the past. That doesn't mean we forget or dismiss it, but it means we stop letting it control us. We learn from it and then let it go. The same goes for the future. It's natural to think about what might happen, to plan and prepare, but there's a difference between preparing and obsessing. The future is unknown, and no amount of worry will make it certain. What we can do is focus on this moment, making the most of the present, knowing that it's the only thing we can truly influence. It all comes down to attention. Where we place our focus determines the quality of our lives. If we're always looking backward, we'll miss what's happening right in front of us. If we're always worried about the future, we'll never appreciate the present. It's not about ignoring what's real. It's about understanding that our reality is shaped by how we choose to see it. Life is happening right now, and the more we learn to be present with it, the more we'll realize that it's not about waiting for the right moment. It's about recognizing that every moment is right. Learning to direct our attention doesn't mean we never feel pain, frustration, or sadness. Those emotions are part of being human. But when we accept them without judgment, without getting caught up in them, they pass through us like waves. It's the resistance to these emotions that causes suffering, not the emotions themselves. When we resist, we're fighting against the natural flow of life, trying to control something that isn't meant to be controlled. The truth is, everything is temporary. Every feeling, every situation, every experience, good or bad, will eventually pass. It's when we cling to things, trying to hold on to what we think should last forever, that we create our own suffering. But if we can accept that life is always changing, always moving, we'll find a sense of peace in knowing that we don't have to hold on to anything. We can simply let it all be, knowing that everything has its time and everything will pass. The idea of letting go is something that's often misunderstood. People think it means not caring, as if letting go is a sign of indifference or weakness. But true letting go is one of the most powerful things we can do. It's not about rejecting something or pretending it doesn't matter. It's about releasing our tight grip on how things should be, allowing life to unfold as it will. When we stop trying to force outcomes, we open ourselves to new possibilities that we couldn't see when we were stuck in our own rigid expectations. Most of the time, we think we know what's best. We make plans, set goals, and outline the path we think our lives should follow. But life rarely goes according to plan, and that's not always a bad thing. The things we resist the most are often the very things that lead to growth, the unexpected twists that push us to become more than we thought we could be. The trick is to stop fighting against the current and instead learn to flow with it. This doesn't mean we stop trying, but it does mean we stop expecting things to turn out exactly as we imagine. When we let go of these expectations, we also let go of a lot of unnecessary suffering. How many times have we been upset because something didn't go the way we wanted it to, only to realize later that it worked out for the best? The mind clings to what it knows, to what feels safe and familiar, but life is far bigger than what our minds can comprehend. When we loosen our grip, we make space for life to surprise us in ways we never thought possible. This doesn't mean we should abandon all our desires or aspirations. It means understanding that there is a difference between having a vision for the future and becoming attached to a specific outcome. We can still dream, we can still strive for more, but we do so with the understanding that life has its own flow. Sometimes, what we think we want isn't what we need, and it's only in hindsight that we can see the wisdom of life's detours. There's a quiet strength in accepting what we cannot control. It's not about defeat. It's about recognizing that we don't have to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. So much of our suffering comes from trying to control things that are simply beyond us. We want people to act a certain way. We want situations to turn out exactly as we planned, and we want life to be predictable and safe. But control is an illusion. Life is unpredictable, people are complex, and trying to force things into neat boxes only leads to frustration. True freedom comes from accepting that we don't have control over everything, but we do have control over how we respond. It's in our responses that we find our power, not in bending life to our will. When we stop trying to control every detail, we allow life to unfold naturally, and we can begin to see the beauty in the unexpected. This acceptance doesn't mean passivity. It doesn't mean we sit back and let life happen to us without any effort or engagement. On the contrary, it means we engage with life more fully, with a sense of curiosity and openness. Instead of clinging to rigid plans, we approach each day with the understanding that things may not go as we expect, and that's okay. We do what we can with what we have, and we trust that whatever happens is part of a larger process that we might not yet understand. There's a kind of simplicity in this approach. It strips away the drama and the complications that we often create in our own minds. We tend to overcomplicate things, turning minor inconveniences into major problems because we resist what's happening instead of accepting it. But when we learn to let go of our need to control every outcome, we free ourselves from this unnecessary burden. Life becomes lighter, less of a struggle, and more of an adventure. In this state of acceptance and presence, we begin to see things more clearly. When we're no longer clouded by fear, expectation, or attachment, we can approach life with a calm mind and an open heart. This clarity allows us to make better decisions, to see opportunities that we might have missed before, and to move forward without being weighed down by the past or paralyzed by the future. But this clarity doesn't come overnight. It's something we cultivate over time through practice and patience. We won't always get it right. There will be times when we slip back into old patterns, where we try to control things or let fear take over. That's part of the process. The important thing is not to judge ourselves when this happens, but to gently bring our attention back to the present moment. Each time we do this, we strengthen our ability to live in the now, to be fully present with whatever is happening. The mind loves to wander, to escape into fantasies of the future or the regrets of the past. But when we learn to bring it back to the present, we realize that most of our fears and anxieties dissolve. The present moment is rarely as overwhelming as our minds make it out to be. In fact, when we're fully present, we find a certain peace, even in difficult circumstances. We realize that we have the strength to handle whatever comes our way, not by controlling the situation, but by controlling our response to it. In this way, life becomes less about what happens to us and more about how we move through it. It's not about avoiding hardship or discomfort, those are inevitable, but about learning to navigate them with grace. When we stop resisting what is, we stop adding unnecessary layers of suffering on top of the challenges we face. We become more resilient, more adaptable, and ultimately, more at peace. This isn't a passive resignation to fate, it's an active engagement with life, rooted in the understanding that while we can't always control what happens, we can control how we respond. And in that response, we find our true power. It's not about dominating life or bending it to our will, but about flowing with it, embracing the highs and the lows, knowing that both are part of the same journey. The truth is, life is unpredictable, and no amount of planning or control can change that. But when we learn to accept this unpredictability, we stop fearing it. We stop seeing it as something to be avoided and start seeing it as part of the beauty of being alive. Life is a dance between the known and the unknown, and it's in that dance that we find our growth, our challenges, and ultimately, our deepest sense of purpose. When we let go of the need to control, we allow ourselves to truly live. We stop holding back, stop hiding from the uncertainties, and start embracing them as part of the process. It's not always easy, and it requires a deep level of trust in ourselves, in the process of life. But it's the only way to truly be free. In this freedom, we find that life becomes less about perfection and more about presence. The pursuit of perfection is something many of us have been conditioned to chase, believing that if we just get everything right, we'll finally find peace. But perfection is a trap. It's an illusion that keeps us from experiencing life as it is. There will always be imperfections, flaws, and things that don't go as planned. The beauty of life lies not in its perfection, but in its raw, unfiltered reality. When we stop striving for perfection, we can finally appreciate the moments in front of us. We can see the beauty in imperfection, the lessons in failure, and the growth that comes from struggle. It's easy to get caught up in the idea that we need to have everything figured out, that our lives should look a certain way, and that we should always be striving to reach some ideal state of being. But the truth is, life is messy. It's full of ups and downs, and that's what makes it real. We spend so much time trying to fix things, to mold life into something more polished, more acceptable, more perfect. But in doing so, we miss out on the richness of what's actually happening. We miss the small, imperfect moments that make life worth living. The laughter that comes in unexpected situations, the connections we make with others in the midst of chaos, the peace we find in accepting things just as they are. This acceptance of imperfection doesn't mean we stop trying to improve ourselves or our circumstances. It means we stop waiting for everything to be perfect before we allow ourselves to enjoy life. Too often, we postpone our happiness, thinking that we need to reach a certain milestone, solve a particular problem, or become a better version of ourselves before we can fully embrace life. But life is happening now, in all its imperfection, and waiting for it to be perfect is a waste of precious time. The more we practice letting go of this need for perfection, the more we open ourselves to the fullness of life. We become more compassionate toward ourselves and others, understanding that everyone is navigating their own imperfect journey. We stop holding ourselves to impossible standards and start appreciating the effort we're making, even if it's not flawless. Compassion is an essential part of this process. So often, we're our own harshest critics, constantly judging ourselves for not being good enough, fast enough, or successful enough. But this judgment only adds to our suffering. It keeps us locked in a cycle of dissatisfaction, always reaching for something just out of our grasp. When we learn to be kinder to ourselves, we begin to see that we don't need to be perfect to be worthy of love, peace, and fulfillment. Compassion allows us to move through life with more ease. It softens the edges of our experience, making it easier to accept the things we can't control. It also helps us to connect with others on a deeper level. When we stop judging ourselves harshly, we stop judging others so harshly as well. We begin to see that everyone is doing their best with what they have, and that we're all in this together, navigating the same uncertainties and challenges. In this space of compassion and acceptance, we find that life becomes more about connection than about achievement. It's the relationships we build, the moments we share, and the love we give and receive that ultimately define the richness of our lives. The pursuit of success, while important, is empty without these connections. And yet, we often sacrifice our relationships in the name of success, believing that once we've achieved a certain level, we can then focus on the people and things that matter. But by then, it might be too late. Realizing this shifts our priorities. We start to see that the present moment is all we truly have, and that the people around us, those we care about, are what make that moment meaningful. Success, in the end, isn't about how much we accomplish, but about how much we connect, how deeply we live, and how fully we experience the moments that are given to us. When we stop striving for some distant goal of perfection, we start living in the now, appreciating the beauty that's already here. This shift in focus from perfection to presence, from control to acceptance, transforms the way we live. It changes our relationship with ourselves, with others, and with the world around us. We no longer feel the constant pressure to perform, to prove ourselves, or to measure up to some external standard. Instead, we become more at peace with where we are, knowing that life is a journey, not a destination. And on this journey, it's not the big, grand moments that define us. It's the small, everyday experiences, the quiet moments of reflection, the simple conversations with loved ones, the acts of kindness we extend to others. These are the moments that shape our lives, and when we learn to give them our full attention, we begin to see the profound impact they have on our overall sense of well-being. Attention, after all, is the most valuable thing we have. It's the one thing that is truly ours to give, and where we choose to place it determines the quality of our lives. When we give our attention to the things that nourish us, that bring us joy and peace, we begin to experience life in a different way. We stop feeling overwhelmed by the demands of the world and start feeling more grounded, more centered, and more connected to what truly matters. This doesn't mean that life will always be easy or that challenges will disappear. There will still be difficulties, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But when we've trained ourselves to focus on what's important, to accept what we cannot control, and to let go of the need for perfection, we're better equipped to handle those challenges with grace. We become more resilient, more flexible, and more capable of navigating the twists and turns of life without losing our sense of peace. In the end, this is what it means to live deeply, to be fully present in each moment, to appreciate the imperfections of life, and to stay grounded in the things that truly matter. It's about letting go of the illusions of control and perfection and embracing the beauty of what is. When we do this, we find that life becomes richer, not because it's perfect, but because we've learned to accept it as it is. And in this acceptance, we find freedom. Freedom from the constant striving, from the endless need to be more, do more, or have more. We find peace in the realization that we are enough, that life is enough, and that, in this very moment, everything is as it should be. Thank you for sharing this reflection. If these thoughts resonated with you, I encourage you to sit with them, to reflect on where you're placing your attention, and to consider how you might live more fully in the present. Life is here, now, waiting for us to notice its quiet beauty, its imperfect perfection.